So it's an absolute pleasure to welcome one of my really old friends, Eliza Marshall, who is an absolute superstar. And we'll get straight into the conversation. First of all, how are you doing, Eliza?
Hi Ian, thank you so much for having me. This is really kind of you. Yeah, I'm good, thanks. All things considered.
Yeah,
Yeah, how are you?
I'm very good. Yeah, good. The most important question of the day is, what's your drink of choice today? What are you on?
Well, I'm not very original at all, I'm afraid. So
Yeah,
I'm actually on a gin and tonic with
very
some
good.
frozen fruit. So
Wow.
it looks a
Okay.
bit like a sort of death bomb.
Yeah. Is that one of your
Um,
five a day?
that's one of my 5 a day, yeah. So that's good. But I'd run out. This is my favourite gin. Well, it's not my
Yeah.
favourite, it's one of them, but I'd run out. So I thought I'd just bring the actual container just to kind of, pay homage to it that
The spirit.
it's looked after us.
Yeah,
And
very
that's
good.
a Scottish gin. So that's just there
Okay.
with
I've got my usual. I've got my Guinness, but I've
it.
also got a whiskey again. I've got a Balvenie. Actually, I'm trying something a bit different. Balvenie with Caribbean flavour, Caribbean class rum.
Oh
So
wow.
very nice, actually. I'm enjoying that. So
Nice.
um,
Perfect combo.
starter for 10. So I'm asking everybody, how did you get involved in what was your beginning of your musical journey, and how did you start the flute, and what your influences when you started off? What sort of age were you?
Well, it's funny, isn't it? Because I hear lots of people give this answer. But I have to give it really because I suppose it's an honest answer, which is that when I was 9, I'd sort of started on the violin when I was about 7, and I wish I'd carried on actually because it's such a great instrument. But I then, Father Christmas delivered a little cassette
Okay.
back in the day, and it was the Chieftains with James Galway.
Yeah.
It was that recording that sort of I was mesmerized actually. I just thought the sound of the flute with that kind of music was just incredible. And
Yeah.
so that year actually I went straight onto the flute, and the violin was abandoned, and that was it really.
Yeah.
Um yeah, so I'm obviously later and after that I kind of looked to other flute players that I thought were amazing as well. But I think I've always found with James Galway that what I really admire about him is that there I was as a little 9-year-old seeing him playing with this brilliant Irish band. And at the same time, he had been principal flute of one of the top orchestras in the world and equally made an album of, um, popular songs and Pink Panthers. And I
Yeah.
just thought that was really fantastic that somebody could be so eclectic, but also be absolutely top of their game.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that
It's
was,
amazing. I had the same. I actually had that cassette as well. It was one of in my dad's collection, and we also had some records under the stairs, a bit like the Harry Potter cupboard under the stairs. And
yeah,
we had two of the records, which I think were the showpieces. So I used to listen to those a lot. That came with
yeah,
the albums that all the flute players have. Especially when you're a teenager and you try and play those pieces that are too hard for you.
yeah.
I remember listening to those a lot when I was younger. Same thing, it's amazing. And actually, when I was a bit older in my 20s, I did a course with Elena Duran, and her husband Michael was James Galway's first manager, and kind of got him on the
Oh,
path. So it's really interesting, kind of getting a little bit of behind the scenes of how that kind of all started as well. And as you said, the commercial side. I mean, being an absolute hero in the classical world, and also crossing the bridge and making it super popular as well. For affecting and inspiring so many generations of flute players really afterwards.
yeah. And also, I think like something, when you are such an established or fantastic classical player to be with the Berlin Phil, that to have the courage in a way to say, actually, I'm still going to do the music of my roots and I'm going to do
Yeah,
something commercial. And obviously, I didn't think that when I was 9, but as I got older, I sort of realised that
yeah,
that's quite brave actually, and I really respected him for that.
yeah. And then, so after you started, I mean, who did you study with at school, and did you do the usual kind of youth orchestra path and all the rest of it?
Well, so I I was a bit of a slightly different path, I suppose I took. That I was at a Steiner school,
Yeah,
and for anyone who doesn't know anything about Steiner, they're just slightly, um, alternative and international, I suppose. So my influences during my school time were very worldy. So we would have like African bands coming to visit or South American bands, and they'd all come and stay with the local families. And so it was very sort of involved. And that was really amazing because obviously I loved folk music. But I guess my parents, when I was about 13, they just thought maybe I should stretch myself a bit. So I started going to the Birmingham Junior Conservatoire, where I had an amazing teacher, Di Clark, who is actually with Orchestra of the Swan now, and has been for years. And she was absolutely brilliant because I think she could see that I was passionate about all styles of music, and she brought that out, sort of lured it out of me, and then brought me into the classical world as well. So that was really useful. But weirdly, and I don't really know why, but I just never got involved with any local sort of youth orchestras or even NYO. I didn't really know about it. So that isn't, in a way, I think is a shame when I see people like yourself or, you know, people of our generation who have all done that together. I sort of feel like maybe I missed out. And I think it's a phenomenal training that you get in your teens doing that kind of thing. But nonetheless, I guess I just had something slightly different that was also exciting, just not quite the same.
And then so we met at the academy. So tell us a bit about that kind of journey and how you decided that you wanted to go to the academy and maybe the audition process and who your teachers were there as well.
Well, I mean, we had a great time, didn't we, Ian? I just have a lot of good memories. So again, sort of when I was 18 or 17 when you have to apply, I didn't really know very much about each conservatoire, but I just knew that I loved music and I loved playing, and that really I wanted to be a performer. So then I was guided towards some of these amazing conservatoires. And sorry, I've actually got a frog in my throat tonight, but
you need a bit of your drink, that'll help.
I do. What a good idea. Cheers.
Cheers. Very nice to see you.
Brilliant. So I went through the whole audition process, applied for everything, and the two that sort of came out that I really loved were the Academy or the Scottish Academy. And I mean, to this day, who knows what the right choices are to make at that time in your life, but actually I went to Academy and I just completely had the most brilliant 4 years, with incredible people around me. I was in awe of all my contemporaries, and I was just really lucky because I had Michael Cox as my teacher, who is just the most phenomenal player. And again, he kind of, I think he understood that I wasn't coming from a sort of mainstream angle, maybe. And that, you know, I'd sometimes turn up with a sort of Chinese folk melody and say, well, I've just been practicing my tone this week, which I'm sure he despaired at, but he was really wonderful. And of course we had Baz as our head of woodwind, didn't we? Who was your teacher, wasn't he?
He was for the first 3 years. I was really lucky. I had Baz, and in my third year, then I had Jaime. I was kind of Jaime's first student at the academy. And so that was a very special kind of crossover and very different things, but both, you know, equally fantastic. And Baz was especially what I needed in the first year. I was kind of this free spirit and it's quite musical, but I needed to be kind of pinned to the floor and given a technique and rhythm and stuff like that. And it was fantastic. You know. Everything he said was for a musical reason and integrity rather than just a characteristic or a trait of playing. It was always incredibly thought out, you know, everything he said in the lesson. And actually, to this day, I still remember everything. And bits and pieces come out, you know, at certain points in an orchestra or when I'm teaching myself. And I remember actually that was Baz, you know. He's always with you, you know. It's amazing.
I think I always relay this this to you, particularly if we've had a drink too many in a bar somewhere back in the old days. But I think I was probably in my second year and you were in your fourth year and you were playing principal flute in the symphony orchestra there. And I remember coming down to the bar and just sort of going, oh, the flute playing so beautiful, and I absolutely loved it. And Baz just sat me down and he just said, just don't compare yourself to anybody ever. And I think even more like, in this day and age with social media, and
Yeah,
those words ring in my ears so often, because how wise was he? It was
yeah,
and it, in a way, it allowed you to, not that I was comparing myself, but he could obviously see there was some sort of frustration in me as a second year, and he
mm,
was saying appreciate people, but don't compare yourself, because
yeah,
there's no need in a way. So yeah, he was a wise man.
yeah. I think that's a really important point. That's something I've struggled with. I mean, especially when I was younger, sort of, it's very easy to try and compare yourself, but especially when you're constantly on trial or you're doing lots of things like that.
Yeah,
But the people that are the most successful, and you're an absolute testament to this, you've got to be comfortable in your own skin and you've got to find your own path. And that's a much more attractive quality and gives off much more positive vibes in terms of, choosing a career path and the kind of musical energy that you give when you walk on a stage. And that's something that I've, later on come to realize,
yeah,
isn't it?
definitely. Yeah, it definitely is.
So yeah, so the academy, it was a really amazing time. And then what happened kind of as you were leaving college? I mean, how did you find your path kind of coming out of college, and what sort of things were you doing at that point?
Well, it's so interesting because, and this isn't really relevant, and you might be asking about this later, but I
Yeah,
feel now through this pandemic that I'm right back at the same stage that I was at when I was 22 and I just graduated. And the feeling, I think, is that you want to be doing music and you know that you want to play, but you're not quite sure what your path is. And I think that's almost how it feels in this time, where we're kind of like, we want to do things, but everything we're used to isn't there. So how do we adapt? And I would say that certainly for me was the feeling when I came out of college. I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do,
yeah,
but I definitely wanted to play. And I was doing sort of various little things with chamber groups, and I'd have little gigs here and there. And then what I actually did was I went off to Africa for a few months, and I ran a project out there. Um, it was a AIDS awareness project, actually, through music and drama,
yeah,
um, which was really amazing and perfect for me at that time.
yeah,
And then when I came back, I sort of felt like actually it was good to see that you can be away for a while and come back, and
yeah.
your face hasn't sort of been forgotten.
Mm,
So yeah, that was like the first few years. And then when I was at academy, actually, I always loved, and sort of, I think controversially in a way, I don't think everyone particularly enjoyed it, but I just absolutely loved all the commercial sessions that we had to do. And
yeah,
I was always up for doing them, and I just really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the music, and I enjoyed the atmosphere of just having to, have your headphones on. And
yeah,
so I did a lot of that at academy. And I also just loved sort of working with different composers. And it seemed that that sort of work gently came my way a little bit. And I funnily was that was my comfort zone, um, which was really lovely. And yeah, so I ended up doing more and more, I suppose, a variety of sort of recordings and working with composers with the bits of chamber stuff that I had. Um,
yeah,
I have a trio with um, a couple of really good friends and colleagues from Academy, Camilla Pay and Nicholas Ellis.
yeah,
And we were quite busy actually throughout that time. And we would commission a lot of new works and then do work, play with sort of dancers like Ballet Rambert and
yeah,
that sort of thing. So it was lots of sort of grafting around different areas of the industry.
yeah. Yeah. It's amazing when you kind of plant lots of seeds like that. I mean, it comes to fruition over time, doesn't it? And
Yeah, it's funny because I never sort of had a game plan. I see lots of well, again, contemporaries of ours, or like yourself, of course, or amazing players who seem to be very sure of what they wanted to do, and maybe it was the orchestral route or the soloist route. And I
yeah,
never really had that. I didn't. Maybe it was because of the sort of slightly broader childhood that I'd had in a way, or the kind of, you know, the broader musical education that I had, that I never sort of thought this is what I want to do. I was just kind of like this Tigger just boinging around, and I was just really excited if somebody called me and wanted me to play. And but I did know that I wanted to play. That was always my thing. I just thought, and like everybody, I probably had terrible imposter syndrome and thought I can't do lots of things. But whenever anything came up, I would never say no. So I was always pushing myself and going outside of my comfort zone.
How did you start the folk group that you play in, Rinagri? How did that come about?
So I guess that came about, I mean, looking over the years. So when I sort of started doing a few sessions, I then was lucky to be booked on this tour with Peter Gabriel. And we then went on to do 3 years of touring and recorded 2 albums with him. And he inspired me so much, just as a wonderful musician. And lots of the musicians I was playing with were just fabulous performers and musicians. So I felt really privileged to be with this group of people. And at the same time, my boyfriend is a singer and writer, a singer-songwriter. But we both come from like really different sides of the industry. So even though I'm a slightly weird flute player, I'm definitely classically trained. Whereas he definitely can't read anything, or, you know, you give him a piece of paper with notes on it and he has no idea what it's really about. But he can create things, and his ears have this, you know, it's just amazing to see how a musician can work in a completely different way, but with an amazing talent. So we just always wanted to do something together. And I think being on stage with somebody like Peter Gabriel, you get to kind of go, wow, I quite like these. Of course, we've never played to 10,000 people as Rinagri, but to be on those sorts of stages, I just felt like I was in my element, and I wanted to have my own band. So it sort of developed from that. And it's been really incredible just to sort of see what it's like to have to write, improvise, you know, open doors again that maybe we wouldn't have done when we were at academy or in the sort of classical world. Although of course we do, and I know they all interlink, but it's sort of
not very often. I have had a lovely afternoon. I mean, I've heard a couple of tracks of the group before, but I've never I went down a complete rabbit hole this afternoon. I had a lovely afternoon listening to your music on YouTube. It's been really lovely, and just getting to know, getting to know a bit more. I've done a couple of little bits and pieces over the years. I was very fortunate to do something where with Ravi Shankar at Dartington like 15 years ago, and we did a project with half Western and half Eastern musicians, and it was over the course of a week. And of course, being the flute player, it's kind of, you know, Krishna and almost the center of the piece in a way at certain points. But I just didn't know how much was involved, you know, how it's built up with all the ragas, and there's so many rules. I mean, it sounds very free, but it's incredibly complex, the music.
So was it all written out?
It was kind of, he kind of composed the piece, and then over a period we had a conductor who transcribed it for us each day. But I mean, the Indian musicians just left us in the dust. You know, I mean, they heard it once and they could play it straight away. Whereas we took a little bit of time to catch up. But it was amazing. It was amazing.
I did a gig some time ago where we got Rinagri and we played with there's an amazing centre in London called the Bhavan, and it's like the hub of Indian music and dance. Sort of one of the top places in Europe. Actually, it's just beautiful. You kind of walk in and you feel like you've disappeared into Mumbai, and they're just lovely people there. And we did a gig with I think it's called a marindangam, which is a drum that you play on the side. And we had some strings and we had tablas and sitars, and actually just watching how they communicated with us. It was sort of what you're saying, that, you know, it's in their blood, isn't it? Whereas
it's almost a different perspective in a way, because Western music sometimes, especially as a soloist, and it's quite easy to become quite egotistical and a about you, and you know, and even if you're trying to channel the music, but in Eastern music like that, it's just so natural, and it's just not about the musician at all. I mean, it just comes out, the texture. And
Have you ever
so
seen? Do you know Harry Prasad Chaurasia?
no,
Have you heard of him? So he's like this amazing bansuri. Bansuri being the Indian flute, bamboo flute. And he's kind of the guru of the bansuri. He's in his 80s now, but I did actually see him at the Bhavan, and exactly sort of what you said. They, the fluidity of the playing and the sort of improvisation and how the raga builds up just looked so natural and improvised. But actually, I think it's so ingrained in how he, the years that he will have been playing, and it was very inspiring. Very inspiring.
Yeah. I had a really nice experience as well in Malaysia. Sonia, the piccolo player, took me to. She's very into Indian culture and yoga and different things, and she took me to this music class with an Indian musician, and he was just teaching them the sitar, and they were doing a similar thing. It was like they were practicing their scales or doing what they do, but we just sat cross-legged for half an hour and just in the corner and just listened to them build this thing up. And the students, there was about 5 students, and it was just a very different way of just doing their scales and arpeggios, basically. But it was amazing just to experience that, and so relaxing, just being part of that. And and then he would sing to them as well, and just to instruct them on how it was going. It's a lovely way of making music.
Incredible. So, I know Sonia, and we met in Brisbane.
Yeah, she's a lovely soul. She's very talented and a really lovely person.
Yeah.
So now, you usually in normal times you also do the Lion King. So I mean, that's one of your many talents. All the ethnic flutes, and I can see you've got a big bag of them behind you as well.
I have. I sort of feel like they're kind of hiding and growing out of the tree that's sort of there as well. But yeah, I do. I mean, again, that was one of the life's just. I do believe sort of. I kind of always used to say this when I was a bit younger, and I guess I still believe it, that life sort of throws you lucky cards sometimes, and it's just a matter of knowing if it passes you by, or if you can grab it. And I guess I felt throughout my 20s like just little lucky cards came my way, and even things like, I remember the first time I decked on Phantom, Chris Bain, lovely, amazing Chris was like, "Yup, just come in, just do this." And to me, that was really exciting. Some people might not like musicals. Actually, I've grown up with, my parents met because my mum was a director and choreographer, and my dad was MDing a show. She was just amateur, but so we've grown up with musicals. So playing on Phantom was really exciting, and then that led to Andy Findon being supportive, and then of course bumping into Adrian Brett and saying, "Oh, actually, I love playing all these instruments as well, and I've got this crazy collection." And then he just kindly said, "Come in," and now it's very strange to look at how life takes twists and turns, and
it is.
Here I am.
I mean, yeah, exactly. But you just reminded me. I used to have this kind of mantra and saying when in my early 20s, that I mean, luck is preparation meeting opportunity, and you've got to be in the right zone and prepared to actually, as you say, just go for the experience and make the most of it. I mean, it is about luck, but you've also got to turn that into an opportunity as well.
Absolutely, yeah. And also the word that just keeps coming to me, I was thinking about chatting to you today, and I was thinking, what's the word that is important to me at the moment? And I think it probably is relevant. I don't know if it is for you, but I'm sure it is for lots of other musicians. But just bravery, really. And actually, whatever it be, I mean, I've played with various orchestras, but not in a similar way to you or others. But when I've done those things, or if I've turned up for a session where I've had to do a really hard solo, that's really pushed me each time, and it still does. And again, coming back to like where we are now, what this is that you're creating here, which is a lovely hub to have, catch ups and little drinkies together. But that's a really nice, that almost takes bravery to start something new. And I would never particularly want to talk about myself, but actually I do want to push my boundaries in this time, because that's what we have to do. And it's nice to be back in that point again where we are all doing that, and I think it's very supported in a way, and we're supportive of one another. And as you say, like, you have to have the sort of preparation or be prepared for when the opportunities come, but then you've also got to be brave enough to push yourself through them if you don't naturally if you don't have a huge natural confidence all the time. Or
but even if you do, I mean, I found the same thing with auditions, and also because I had that kind of period where I was in the shop and trying to straddle both worlds, and that didn't really work. I was trying to, I was still doing nice playing, but it was very stressful. And then when going for auditions, you're not as prepared as you should be, and then that kind of takes a toll as well. So I think when you're kind of in your 20s, you're very much almost, well, some people are bulletproof, as in you're really flying and you feel like you can cope with anything. But as the years go on, you build an inner strength, which is a different confidence. I think it's a different level of kind of assuredness. But it is difficult as you go on, to maintain that, I think.
But then equally, like there, with your example, there's the utmost respect, I think, that you had that was your situation at that point, and those were the two paths that you had, and that actually you kind of walked away from the stability almost of having the shop, and what a great thing that was, because it meant you could fly with everything you wanted to do. But again, that took bravery in its own right, didn't it, of like going, well, I'm going to take this little risk, and and it's worth it until there's a world pandemic.
It's funny that I've actually got it on my desk. I just appreciate every concert so much more now, and regardless of who it's playing with, whether it's whatever orchestra or a choral society or whatever, or it's just in the South Bank or a church or whatever. I just really appreciate that, and I've got all my passes from kind of South Bank and everywhere, and they're just stacked up from the last kind of since I left the flute shop, because it just means the world to me, actually, to be playing the flute full time again, and just being with colleagues and just having those experiences and playing with other amazing musicians. It's just a nice reminder, as well. But it's, as you say, it's difficult, when we're all stuck at the moment in limbo, just waiting for things to start to happen again. It's nice to be able to have the time to kind of look forward and almost you can plan for the future as well. If we do get back to normal at some point, you're going to appreciate the opportunities that come in, and I hope it's going to be a period like the 20s, like the 1920s, that after the First World War, there'll just be this complete excess of people starving for culture and those kind of experiences, and hopefully we'll be very busy in a few months or a year's time. We'll just have to see what happens.
We're all crossing all fingers.
Exactly.
It does feel like it though, doesn't it? Because we're not only deprived of sort of art and culture and music, but we're all deprived of one another, which is such a weird thing, isn't it? So when everyone says, oh, we've been so lucky we haven't had war and it's all the things we have, I completely agree and sort of feel really grateful for what I have. But I'm also so desperate to be with people and hug people. And, you, especially as musicians, we see such a diverse range of people, don't we, all the time? And I often notice if I speak to someone I haven't spoken to for a while, and they're like, oh, hi, how are you? And I'm like, yeah, I'm really good, thanks. And I go into a default mode, and I sort of forget that I might actually have had a really crap week because it's just been, not very motivated or whatever. Because we have that. We're so used to just being with people and responding in a particular way, which is actually good because it keeps us up and keeps feeling good. And
also, I think with the musician's way of life, I mean, our professional life is as much our social life, and the people that you hang out with, you might spend more time with them than your family, especially you go on tour or whatever else. And so it's that's what we're starving, as well as the social side of it, and just being silly. I mean, it's just that connection you have, being silly in rehearsals and just having a joke and a bit of banter and that.
I mean, I don't know what you're talking about. I have no idea what you're talking about.
I stream on my Instagram from the LPO, London Philharmonic, and they were talking. It was Lee, the tuba player, was talking about how to pack on tour, and it just brought me back. I mean, he's such a lovely bloke, so funny, and such a big character in the orchestra. But just missing that kind of interaction with people like that, and just just being silly when you get on the bus, when you're going on tour, and just it's like being at school. It's like being on a school trip, even though you're all grown up. It's just the way that you kind of act together, and that's what we miss as much as obviously the fantastic music and everything, being on the stage and performing. But
I'll tell you what's been amazing. Like, I sort of had a revelation, I suppose, this year as well, of that I almost felt, I didn't feel like I'd fallen out of love with music, but it was just part of what we do. So, especially if you do a show or any of those things, I mean, I've got the most gorgeous colleagues there and couldn't be more grateful for the show. But when we're all just playing all the time, it is almost like just a treadmill of that's what we do. And to actually stand back for a while, I think I've gone through this, I don't know if you have or others have, but this sort of full circle of like, oh, I wonder if I should be doing something else. And maybe if I want to, have a different career, just that sort of question. And then coming round to the fact that actually, no, I completely believe in what I do and I completely love it. And not only do I love it, but it was my birthday just before Christmas and I was listening to Janáček's Sinfonietta, which was one of the first pieces that I played, actually principal flute in at Academy in my first year. And I just cried. I just literally wept. And I thought, I haven't done that for a while, where music just completely touches me. And it was so lovely to just go, actually, I love this. I love it really deeply. And it's so important, because you can kind of feel when, again, like, it's just been ripped from us, hasn't it? And you sort of think, oh, are we all a bit pointless? And actually there's a huge point and reason for music in our lives, and what we bring, what music brings to people, and it's really not, if there's any silver linings, it's nice to sort of have the opportunity to remember that.
I had a very similar experience. We were watching, I'm in a bubble with my brother, and I went to see him a few weeks ago. And we were watching, I can't remember the name of the film, it's going to really annoy me now. If you can help me out. It's a remake of the Barbara Streisand film about the singer, and his widow. And it had Lady Gaga in it. The new version.
No, you see, I should be able to tell you.
Yeah, I can't believe. Oh, anyway, I'll put a note in there. It's really obvious. But it was really fun, but I lost it. I mean, just at the end of the film, my poor brother and his girlfriend was like, "What's going on here?" It just got me at that moment. I'm really missing performing, and and I got to do that silly pop tour about 10 years ago, and I had it in the car. I've been listening to it when I've been driving. It's the only thing that makes me feel a bit more normal is listening to music in the car, like as though nothing's going on.
Yeah.
And I've been driving down in the Ashdown Forest, so having that in the summer, especially, I had it down, the roof down, and listening to this stuff. I used to be able to play music, with other people. I put it on for like just 15 minutes and just showed them, because they've never seen it, this tour that we did, and it's just like, it's like so calming. It's like, actually, that experience, we have had that, and it will come back, but it just got me at that moment,
Yeah. And that actually what we've spent all our lives, even like going right back to what inspired us when we were younger and what's inspiring children today, we've spent our whole lives dedicated to that, and still having to practice, having to try to motivate yourself to practice, and that is a skill, because I think I kept having this kind of like, well, what do I do? I don't know what to do, because I'm useless, and you look at all these doctors and nurses and you think, well, I don't have a use. What can I? Yeah. And then actually going, no, we're all really skilled at something, and it's taken years of dedication. And, you look at all through our teenage years and all that time, yes, it was good fun to play with other people, but it also took so much focus, and and it's worth it. I think it's worth it. And
it's nice as well. I mean, I've had a connection. My little girl, she's 8, and she's doing grade 1 piano, and she always wants to FaceTime me in the middle of the week and play her pieces, and then I see her on a Sunday. but I just wind her up a little bit. And I think we kind of we appreciate teaching even more now. It's like the main focus. I mean, it always has been a main focus, but that's the only thing that you're doing. You're kind of stuck in front of a computer screen and you're teaching other people music, and that's your kind of outlet at the moment exclusively. But she plays her piano pieces and she puts me up on the piano on the phone, and we just have a bit of chat and banter, and so she goes, right, I'm going to play Underneath the Acacia Tree. So I'm like, just before we start, what's this one about then? And she said, don't be silly, Daddy. And then the next one's Bumper Cars. I was like, so what's this one about? And she just starts tutting at me and just carries on, just ignores me. And I said, you're not playing properly, because I know when she's playing properly because she's concentrating really hard and her tongue sticks out the side of her mouth when she's really concentrating. Oh, I just sit in front of the camera just going like this. You're not concentrating, Emily.
Brilliant. She's probably like, Daddy, that's because you're sticking your tongue out.
But it was nice. I mean, she came around at the weekend, and I was just playing little bits of film music, because we rewatched all the Harry Potter films recently, and she's a big Star Wars fan as well, probably because of me, obviously. And I've given her all my Star Wars figures, the original ones, like they're probably quite expensive. I've got an original Millennium Falcon that's worth a fortune, and it's just on top of her wardrobe in her room. But it's one of the original ones from the 80s, So I'm just showing how old I am now. But yeah, so I was just playing little bits of that, and she's just kind of taken aback. But you forget, you forget that connection of what music does. Other things outside the flute. You had a very exciting trip, and you love the outdoors as well. You had an exciting trip with a couple of friends, didn't you, a few months ago? Didn't you go on a bit of an expedition together?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I do love the outdoors, and I did. I think we've all gone through these different stages, haven't we, this year? It seems like it's just a kind of up and down, and there are moments of like being productive, and then sort of terrible swathes of time of lethargy, and then pockets of bits of work of things. And I don't actually teach. I've had a few pupils here and there, and I've given a few lessons sporadically. But so I had in July, I think I just suddenly thought I need to do something, and I just put this thing, which is my little collie, into the car and just drove up to Scotland actually, and did loads of hiking up around all around Fort William. We did do Ben Nevis, which was a bit like Piccadilly Circus, so it wasn't probably very COVID friendly, but I think it's Glenfinnan Viaduct. I don't know if you've been up around there, but that's where actually they filmed a lot of the Harry Potter. It's like the Harry Potter bridge where the train goes over the viaduct. And there were lots of people there, but if you walk beyond that, there's this amazing, just beautiful path where you're surrounded by Munros, but the path kind of goes between them. And it was just me and the dog for 3 days, and it was really, really wonderful actually, just to be surrounded by kind of proper wilderness, and just really good for the soul. I think in a time like this as well, you just need to sort of, especially with computers and again like social media, everything's sort of very inward, isn't it? And even if we're in touch with people, we're in our computers. So just to kind of go out and go, oh wow, look, and the news is all a bit terrible, but there's a world out there that's beautiful. And then I met Rachel Harwood White, who's a dear old friend of ours from Academy as well. And we walked the West Highland Way, which was just phenomenal. We had a heat wave in Scotland. Have you ever been up there hiking? Or
I've been up to the West Highlands, up that way. But I had a similar experience in the summer that I went to see one of my besties from school, Tom, and his dad's got a place in Flume, which is very close to Courchevel, Chamonix. And so we actually went up a mountain called Tardevant, I think, very close to Mont Blanc. I mean, you could see Mont Blanc in the distance. And we did that. I didn't realise how scared I was of heights, because I've never been on the top of the mountain, and I literally, I was having a panic attack at the top, because I went all the way. We've gone up. We camped overnight. We went about halfway, camped overnight by this lake, and then we got up at like 6 o'clock in the morning, and we went up the other 2 hours or 2.5 hours to the very, very top. come all this way. I'm going to go all the way to the top.
Yeah.
Got narrower, right to the point, and then these two sides just drop, and it just drops for like thousands of meters. And I got there, but then I couldn't get off, and I just sat down, and Tom had his drone, and he took this amazing footage of the drone around the top of the mountain. But the reason that I'm sitting down is because I couldn't move. About 10 minutes, I was just like, I've got here, but how am I going to get down?
Oh my God, Ian, that sounds horrendous. How did you overcome that then?
Well, it was funny because Tom was FaceTiming his dad, like at the top of this mountain, and was like walking this really narrow path, and just like, oh, it's really nice view here, Dad. And I was just like, I couldn't move, so I just like, you just get a grip, you've got to get off the mountain somehow. And I just got off, and after about 5 minutes, and we were a bit further down, and I realised there was something above us, and I wasn't so scared of the heights, but I proper had a bit of a meltdown at the top.
Proper good hiking, it can be frightening, can't it, actually?
Well, it's just so nice, as you say, to be outside and have that scenery and the fresh air, and just be in a completely different environment like that. It's so good for the soul.
Yeah, I think it's so important.
I suppose what we could also talk about, as we kind of touched upon it, with the college time, is if you have, I mean, it's a strange time for everybody, but if you have kind of any advice for younger players kind of coming out of college in terms of what to think about, or how to organize yourself, trying to pursue your dreams, any kind of words of wisdom?
Well, again, I had a feeling you might ask that.
What would you say to your younger self, as well as another way of looking at it, maybe?
I think that's almost harder, but I'll think about that one. But because I've given a few masterclasses at places like Trinity, and for the BFS, and I used to, before this time, I was really passionate about the fact that lots of people, there would always, you'd get quite a lot of negative kind of, well, there's no work and it's so hard to do things. And I think I always had this real kind of actually there is work and there are things to do, and that really hard, kind of like we were saying earlier, be prepared, look for opportunities, and if they aren't coming to you but you really want them, then go out and find them, because maybe they aren't coming to you because they don't know about you, but make yourself known then, but be able to live up to what you're trying to suggest you can do. So I kind of always had this sort of mantra, and I'd go off on one if I was ever giving a class, and I'd have the real kind of if you're not doing anything, then go and find things to do, because there's lots to do, and there are lots of churches and there are lots of clubs to play in if you need experience performing, or but obviously that's now completely changed. It's totally opposite now. There aren't places to play, are there? That you can't get out, and so in a way I'm almost lost in that answer, in what the answer is. But then at the same time, again, I just think, well, we have to adapt. Humans are amazingly adaptable. We are adapting. We are changing what we're doing. Okay, we're probably all living a lot more frugally and slightly worried, and for some people very worried. And of course, none of that is fun. So I don't belittle the devastation of the situation, but I equally think if there are ways to find things to do, again, you're doing this, or there's a project that I'm sort of gently curating at the moment, where we've been writing a new album, and I've been working out how to apply for funding and learning about sponsorship and things that I had no idea about, and haven't been hugely fun, but have been really eye-opening. So I suppose I would say to my younger self, or to the generation coming up, don't give up hope, never give up hope, but be adaptable. And I don't like the word forage, but it's almost that, find the things. What are they? If it's something, so I'm really uncomfortable online, but look, I really wanted to say yes to chat to you. I have had to do a few online live Facebook things. I hate that. but actually it's been really heartwarming, and I've got really nervous and I've put makeup on for things when I'm in my slippers. You know, and that is good for me, because I was probably quite comfortable in where I was at with what I was doing. So to suddenly be in a situation where you're not comfortable.
Yeah, I think that's for you. I think it's also using the time, isn't it? I mean, I found the same with kind of projects outside of music, but other things that I've done, I mean, before the lockdown as well, it's kind of finding new skills. And even with the role in the flute shop, I mean, looking back, it's kind of, well, it's managing a business, it's having a different interaction with people, it's learning about the technical sides and working with Eliana in the workshop was, hugely enlightening about how things work, with why they break down on the flute, and having a feeling of that.
Yeah.
And then also with the martial arts side, I spent a lot of time doing the jiu-jitsu stuff, and I've been doing that for nearly 20 years now. And I got my black belt in 2014, I think it was. But actually having to teach the class from about brown belt level, teaching a physical thing like that is very different to teaching the flute. But the two are very intertwined, and that side of it makes me a better flute teacher, and the flute teacher makes me a better martial artist, being able to explain things like that. And also the other thing that we had was that my teacher, who gave me my black belt, is with one of my very good friends, and he's moved to America now a few years ago. But he took what we do for our white belt stuff, self-defense. So it's usually if somebody grabs you, it's called Uwara, so it's self-defense, but it's escaping from somebody grabbing you, basically. And he adapted those techniques for blind people. And so that's what he's been doing the last few years, is he has started self-defense for the blind and been teaching it around a course all around America, basically, different states.
Wow, how amazing.
And so as a result of that, we had maybe 2 or 3 blind people in our class at one point. And when you're doing the warm-up, and explaining to do star jumps and doing techniques and how this is going to work, and then how to fall and throw people when you're blind, and the way that they hold themselves, their bodies, the core, they didn't have core strength for some reason being blind, I'm not sure why. But after a few months of training, the way they carried themselves and their confidence and body posture was so much more positive that, I mean, some of them came because they'd unfortunately had a horrific experience where somebody mugged them or attacked them even when they had a blind dog, which is just horrific. But after some training, they just carried themselves completely differently on the streets. So it's an amazing thing when you have to kind of explain things in a different way. And I'm not very big. I mean, I'm much bigger now than I used to be. I mean, when I was at college, I was skinny, so I was probably about 10 stone. I'm about 2 stone heavier. But now, even now, I'm not very big compared to some other people. But it's not about that. It's about kind of balance and using somebody else's force and momentum and whatever, and it's technique. But actually, it's very black and white, and there's no nonsense. Like in music, there's sometimes you can fake something, or it can be a bit of a grey area. You can kind of get away with something. But when you're throwing somebody that's like, the guys that I used to train with at my level were much, much bigger. They were like 5, 6, 7 stone heavier than me. So if you're trying to throw somebody that's like 17 stone and you're 11 stone, there's no way in a million years you're going to throw them unless you're using technique well. And so it means that that the technique works or it doesn't work. So you're either going to throw them or you're not going to throw them. There's no in between, and that's quite nice to see that kind of black and white. And so when it came to kind of doing auditions, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? I mean, you're going to play a wrong note, or it's the concerts even. Nobody's going to die. From that, so it's an interesting thing. So I think taking the time to build these other skills, and using the time efficiently and giving yourself almost like a regime, isn't it? And that's what I found. That's the only way I've got through this process. I find it really difficult. Kind of most of the time I'm in the flat on my own, and I've been very fortunate to have some close friends and family, seeing them every now and again. But unless you have some kind of focus, it's the days just go, don't they? Days go by.
Isn't it amazing to see that though? Like, again, not saying it's a nice thing, so I'm not saying, oh, lucky us, but just as something as a lesson to be learned, that actually, that if we, in the days where we might have moaned because we're a bit busy and knackered, that actually not having things to do isn't, because I sort of thought, oh, I've got all these projects I want to do, and I've been getting really into writing, actually, like composing, and I've had a few commissions, and I'm just like, oh, this is an amazing new thing. But but actually that we previously maybe moaned about thinking we were overly busy and that we needed lots of time, and that actually having all that time doesn't necessarily mean you're going to use it. And that's been the biggest. This year or last year was the first time in about 15 years that my tax has been late. And I just thought, what a ridiculous irony that I've got all this time and I just couldn't make myself do it. I just could not. So it's been a really big insight into the kind of swathes of time don't equal doing lots of things.
I always think, and I was talking to somebody else about this the other day. I was having a chat with them, and my doggy woken up, and we were saying, have you seen that film about a boy? It's a famous book, Nick Hornby, isn't it?
Is it with Hugh Grant? Yeah.
And the way he talks about units of time, as kind of, because he's got nothing to do, he's kind of living off royalties or something. And he says, right, well, a game of snooker, that's 2 units of half an hour, and things like that. And it gets a little bit like that. And I was speaking to my dad, my dad's retired, he's 82, and he feels a little bit like he's been indoors for months now. And he's given himself loads of different projects. And actually, me and my brother, we got together, and I saw this thing online. And my dad used to play the bagpipes when he was younger. That's how he says I got my musical talent, is because of his bagpipe playing. So anyway,
I'm just going to put it by it. Guess what's in there?
What bagpipes?
Northumbrian pipes. That's what I've been doing this year. I've been learning the Northumbrian pipes. Anyway, sorry, carry on.
So the story is that on my dad's 50th, nobody knew that he played the pipes, and he grew up in Oldham, which is just outside of Manchester, and he used to play in a pipe band there when he was a teenager. And so for his 50th, we got him a piper as a surprise. Most people get you a stripper, but we got him a piper. So as a piper come to the house, and my dad played the drums when he was piping, and then they switched. And I'd never heard him play the pipes all my life, And then I was doing something in the Fringe in the festival up in Edinburgh, and we had an extended family holiday where we stayed up for a week. And my dad bought a half set of pipes up in Scotland. And so ever since then, it became a family tradition on Christmas. When we had our Christmas pudding, we lit it, a light with the brandy, that my dad would pipe it in with Flower of Scotland or something else. And then he's got to the age now where he hasn't got the puff anymore. So I saw this thing online that's this electric chanter, and you plug it in, and it makes it sound a bit like a bagpipe. So we gave it to him on Christmas, and he's been playing it for an hour or 2 hours every day since, and he absolutely loves it. And then he's really got back into it. And he played to Emily. He wants to play to my daughter on FaceTime last Sunday, so he played the tune. But the funniest thing was when he first got it, and he still does it now, is he still wants to blow. So he's playing this electronic chanter, going. And my mum just lost it on Christmas Day when he started playing, because he couldn't stop doing it.
That's brilliant.
It's really good for you though. The music, that's especially at that kind of age, to have that interaction, the brain, and you keep your brain working.
That's so brilliant. What a fantastic present. I think that's awesome. That'll be me and my.
We always give him a bottle of whiskey or some socks, but we thought, should do something different this year. So that was good.
I completely understand why he'd be doing that, because the Northumbrian pipes are the bellows. So I have a bellow strapped to my right arm, and then obviously the bag under my left arm. And it's so weird because on Northumbrian pipes, I mean, I play lots of whistles in normal life anyway, but on these pipes, you have to put your finger back down after each note. Right. So you don't lift it like you would on a whistle or you lift it, but then it goes back down. So you play a scale like that. It's really confusing. And then you're like bellowing.
Yeah.
And it's really weird because I found once I could finally sort of get a continuous sound, I just found that I'd play something and I'd kind of breathe in and forget to breathe out and get just really confused. And you suddenly think, gosh, it's so part of how we make music and we don't even realize it. It made me just think about string players and how weird it must be and I mean, I've always envied, because I've not got like massive breath control. So I was always like envy just a really long phrase without having to interrupt it. I just thought, gosh, it must be so weird though that you can do that phrase. But what do you do with your breathing? It's
I've always
just
thought of breathing and musicality and the airstream, especially with flute playing. I always visualize the bow on a violin.
yeah,
That's my, and with note lengths as well. Often in Baroque and classical music, I think about coming in and out of the sound with the length of the note rather than always doing slurs or two and two, da 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 da, which you can often
yeah,
just using the shade and thinking about bow stroke rather than always relying on articulation.
yeah. And actually, that in a way, that's something else I'd probably say. You're just making me think of what else would I say to people coming out of college. And like just before I graduated, one of the best lessons I had, although I can't remember his name, apologies, but it was with an amazing violin teacher because I was playing the Frank Sonata in my final, and it was just brilliant. It was so amazing to hear his point of view, and I think just that whole sort of, again, it's that sort of expanding your horizons in a way of not going, well, this is what I do and this is how I do it. You sort of have to go, well, actually it could be, it could be these ways, or this person might teach me this even though I don't think I like that or know it. Or
Yeah. I came across an amazing video a couple of years ago, and it was Wibb had invited Stephen Isserlis to go and teach his students on a flute course how to play Bach. So they're playing Bach.
cool.
The phrasing, his ideas of phrasing just made sense, and it was just a completely different take. But it's a similar thing, just having an appreciation. It's very easy for the instrument to dictate what comes out or have certain characteristics of the instrument. I find with flute playing, one of the things that I try and do is to have constant vibrato. And it's very easy to have this trick of starting notes with no vibrato and then having some at the end, or not being consistent, and to have more of a kind of especially in certain registers of the flute dynamics, to have more of a kind of a left hand shimmer. But when you see a fantastic string player, they start the vibrato before they put the bow on the string. And I think for flute players, it takes a little time for it to get going.
Yes.
And
I'm a classic example of that, I have to say. It's like James Galway sort of shimmer almost, isn't it?
Yeah. And then another one that I always have a go at my students about is I have a thing about fives. People play fives as a 2 and a 3 or a 3 and a 2 rather than a 5. And having it be hippopotamus 1 is what I always say. Hippopotamus 1. It should be 5 even notes if it's written as a 5. And if it's a 7, it's another story about my dad was he had a racy picture of an Italian film actress above his desk when he left school, went to technical drawing college, and he had a picture of Gina Lollobrigida. So that's 7 is Gina Lollobrigida 1.
Very good. Yeah. Try saying that after several Guinness.
Well, yeah, I was going to say,
yeah. I don't know better. No, you're right. You're right. I bet you're a great teacher, Ian.
I really enjoy teaching, actually, and you just appreciate the kind of the teaching that you've had before. And same in the martial arts, actually. There's a lot of kind of charlatans in the martial arts, but when you see really good people at any discipline in different styles, we used to cross train and have these seminars where you'd have like we have Olympic judokans come and teach us how to throw, and then you have somebody else teach you how to punch and different styles and mix it all up, and then somebody else do kind of more a screamer, which is kind of Filipino with knife defense and stuff like that, or sticks. And just when you see that when you get to a very high level with that sort of thing, you've only got 2 arms and 2 legs. So, and it's all about the mentality as well. So you're either going to win a fight or lose a fight. And the arm goes that way, it bends that way, it doesn't bend the other way. So there's certain techniques that work because of the physicality of the body. And I think it's the same with music and this kind of lineage of teachers as well.
And who sort of resonates with you, and whatever, for whatever reason, I suppose, whatever, as you say, if it's a physical thing or maybe more on an emotional or mental sort of level. Certain people resonate with you, don't they, I guess? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I remember changing from Baz to Jaime, and it was very different. And the thing with Jaime was the sound. I mean, he made the most ridiculous flute sound. And because he was really at the top of his game then, he was playing with 5 different orchestras. And it was when the academy just opened next door, I think. So there was those small practice rooms. So when you're stuck in a small room like that with that ridiculous noise next to you for an hour every week, that was what inspired me. I just remember him kind of carrying me around the room by my elbows like this. We just did sonority for like 45 minutes of an hour lesson for like months. That's all I did was sonority with him, just for the air string. And what he used to do is he used to put his cheek over my fingers on the open holes. So because the cheek's very sensitive, and feel how much air was escaping from the flute to make it more economical. And
wow,
it's made a difference, to sort of really think about that. Anyway,
incredible.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Eliza. Thank you so much for giving up your time and having a drink with me in a chat, and then being so open as well.
It's such a pleasure. It really is. Thank you so much for asking.
And I can't wait for us to meet him for real and have a proper drink in a pub at some point as well. So
me too.
That'd be something to very much look forward to. But, thank you, Eliza.
Absolutely. I look forward to that, and hopefully it won't be too long.